The F1 Focus Podcast with Welman and Hendrik Verwoerd.
Welcome back to this week's Formula One Focus. Lots of controversy at Singapore in the Grand Prix. Looks like the Papaya Rules are out the window, Hendrik. Welcome back, and what's your thoughts on that?
Well, hi. Nice to be back. I don't think the Papaya Rules are out of the window because the team said after the whole controversy, and we can talk about it quickly, that nothing has changed. The way that they're going to approach the battle for the Drivers' Championship, nothing has changed. The Papaya Rules are still in place. So what basically happened was that Oscar Piastri was very unhappy about the fact that he was touched, in fact bumped, by teammate Lando Norris just after the start in the complex, the little chicane turns 1, 2, and 3, just after the start. And he thought that it was an aggressive move by Lando. And he asked the team whether this was acceptable and whether they're going to do something about it. It turns out the team decided they were not going to do anything about it, which I thought was the correct decision. A lot of people maybe said, this is something that the team should have gotten involved with because of, the situation at Monza a couple of races ago when the team did get involved because of a problematic pit stop for Lando Norris. But in my view, there's no equivalency between the two situations. If you remember in Monza, they were running, Lando was running ahead of Oscar. Oscar was under threat of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. The team asked Lando whether he would mind, Oscar coming in first for their scheduled pit stop because they wanted to protect him from a possible attack by the Ferrari. Lando said yes, he could come in, and when Lando came in, he had a slower pit stop. There was a problem, as has been the case on many occasions so far this season. So therefore, he lost his position relative to Piastri, and the team then asked Piastri to give up that position. It was second place, which he then did. So a lot of people are saying now, because of that situation in Monza, and there were a number of other situations also earlier on in Hungary and that sort of thing, should McLaren have gotten involved and asked them to change the places? And I thought that there was no equivalency between that situation at Monza and the one in Singapore. In Singapore, it was simply a case of Lando, seeing a gap, taking the corner on the inside, taking that position off his teammate in a legitimate way. He had taken that position because of a better start off the line. And quite frankly, Piastri left the door open for him, and he saw that gap, but Lando misjudged the situation with Verstappen a little bit, got touched Verstappen's car, and that threw him sort of into the side of, that sounds very dramatic, it wasn't that much, it was a little bump, but into Piastri's car. So it wasn't an aggressive move on Piastri by Lando. And thereby probably or arguably a contravention of their Papaya Rules. It simply was a racing incident, in my view, contact between Lando and Max, and that caused Lando to move into his teammate. So it wasn't a question of just the two McLarens involved. There was a third party involved here, and so therefore there's no equivalency as far as I'm concerned. So therefore, you can't say because the team got involved in Monza, they now also had to get involved in Singapore. It simply is not the same situation. So, yeah, I think the question rather is, how is this going to affect the two now and the way that the team is going to handle the situation, because it's now only the Drivers' Championship that has to be decided.
Yeah, McLaren won their second consecutive constructors title. So now that's why I'm asking whether the rules are now going to go out the window, and these guys, are they going to be 3-2 race number one? And before we go there, I also want to understand from you, what exactly are the Papaya Rules, in a nutshell?
I wish I knew, because it obviously something like that is not, you could never have a watertight rule or arrangement, because every situation is slightly different than the other, even though some situations, and as I said, I don't think these two situations were the same, or at least, marginally equivalent. But there are never two situations that are exactly identical to each other. There are always different scenarios or different factors coming into play. So you can never have a watertight set of rules, even amongst the two teammates. You can basically have guidelines, and I think that is what they have, and that is that up to now, before they clinched the Constructors Championship, it was obvious, and I think that is the kind of rule that every team has anyway. The team's interests come first. You will not. You can race, but you are not allowed to jeopardize the position of the team or the potential position of the team in terms of the points that they could score. So you can race, but be careful. Don't be too aggressive. And that basically turns into something, don't hit each other. Basically means just don't hit each other, because hitting each other is never predictable. You never know what the result of contact between the two drivers is going to be. So I think that, in a nutshell, if that is what you want, is race hard. You can race each other. You don't have to, keep on giving the other guy the opportunity. You don't have to, give up a situation just easily. You can fight for a position, either attacking or defending, but do not touch. Which I think is also a little bit difficult to apply, because how do you define touching each other? Crashing into each other is quite clear. Barging each other out of the way, that is quite clear. But what about a situation of a little bump that didn't, in fact, damage to a serious degree any of the two cars? Yes, there was slight damage to the front wing of Lando, but that was because of his contact with Verstappen, not because of his contact with his teammate. So, both of these cars were not damaged in this little incident. So do you regard this as contact? Don't make contact with each other. Racing is, somebody said it in commentary on Sunday, racing is bumping. When cars race each other, they are going to touch. The question is, what is the degree of touch? And I think that is the one where the guideline comes in. Don't be too aggressive. In other words, and we've seen a number of occasions where Oscar, in fact, has tried to attack Lando. It was in Austria, I think, and I think it was also in Hungary, where he attacked Lando, but had to lock up his brakes in order to avoid contact between the two of them. I think that is an outcome of the arrangement between the two of them. I would argue, actually, from now on, they should just throw this out of the window and let the two guys race. And if there's contact between the two of them, that is just racing. Both of them are driving or racing for the World Championship. It is as prestigious as they come. And you should not have internal rules and regulations about how they go about doing it. Neither of these two drivers will be as stupid enough to take such a big risk that it could jeopardize his championship position. Neither Lando, who's now only 22 points behind, Lando cannot afford to be too aggressive and risk himself retiring on the spot. And neither can Oscar be too aggressive in terms of, say, defending an attack. Oscar, in fact, can afford to play the chances and play for the larger game, and maybe concede a few points here and there in order to maintain at least the lead in this championship. If Oscar is too aggressive and he doesn't finish, that costs him 25 points, and Lando can, retake the lead in the championship. Retake? Did he ever have it? But anyway, can take the lead. So neither of the two drivers, I think, is going to be so stupid to be too aggressive as to jeopardize his potential for the world title. So as far as I'm concerned, if the team just leaves them alone, let them race, let them be, experienced and experienced racing drivers enough that they understand that you cannot just, you don't win a race in the first corner. You win the race at the checkered flag. So I think, just let them go, let them sort it out between the two of them, and let the best man win in the end.
I think the word you were looking for was that the team has to trust them, but also they have to trust each other. And I think,
and be mature about the whole situation.
But that's becoming a bit of a problem when it's this artificial, when it's this artificially managed. Inevitably, there's going to be a feeling of, I was done in, or this. And the trust might suffer a little bit between the drivers specifically. I mean, I like the idea of what you just said now. The championship is now, the Constructors Championship is in the bag. Now you guys do whatever you need to do. If you take both of each other out, doesn't matter. We don't care anymore. We only care about the Constructors Championship. It's your responsibility to secure the Drivers' Championship yourself. If you stuff it up and Max becomes world champion, you've only got yourselves to blame, don't you think?
Absolutely.
I'm a little worried about Mark Webber's influence, though. I mean, it looks like he might be a bit of an agitator, sort of Jos Verstappen in the background, don't you think?
Well, you can understand that. I mean, they are not only countrymen, him and Oscar, but he's also his manager. And he's sort of. Mark probably feels that he has to look after his guy. Um, and Oscar, let's face it, doesn't have the experience, the length or the duration of a Formula One career yet that Lando even has. So maybe Mark feels that he has to fight his corner a little bit more than he would otherwise have wanted to do it. But I don't think it's remotely the same as Jos Verstappen. I mean, Mark is not getting involved in the same way. But there is something that just on the same point, the maturity between the two, not only the trust, but the maturity between the two drivers should come into play, and the team should trust them to be mature enough that they understand the situation. You cannot have, as you've correctly pointed out, you cannot have from their point of view the two dogs fighting for the bone and the third dog coming and clinching that bone. While they are fighting and taking each other off the track. I mean, that would just be absolutely stupid. So, and I don't believe any of them is as stupid as that. So, as far as I'm concerned, when you get to a situation, that they should forget. Also, they should be mature enough. The two drivers should forget about what has happened in the past. Don't think that, because that happened in Hungary, I should now, get preferential treatment or something like that. Yeah, that is over now. The championship is done as far as the constructors and the team is concerned. It's starting now, not from scratch, obviously, because they're not on equal points, but as far as, the team getting involved, because the team got involved for the team's purpose, for the purposes of the team's benefit, right? That is why the team got involved in the past. Now they do not need to do that anymore. And now the two drivers should be free to race each other the way they see fit. That, as far as I'm concerned, is going to be the easiest, because if the team continues to try and get involved in certain situations, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 Grand Prix and 3 sprints still ahead. So for the team to get involved, they are just going to dig themselves into, already in a bit of a hole, but they're going to dig themselves even deeper and deeper in that hole. They should just stop digging and get out of the way.
The big issue here, I think, from an Oscar point of view, is a perception that Lando is the favorite child kind of a thing. And I sent you a little funny video earlier today where they talked about, no, but it has to be in alphabetical order kind of thing. Somebody was, just making fun of it. Is there any truth to it that maybe because Lando's been around longer, he's been with McLaren his entire career, that he should maybe, from McLaren's point of view, be the first one to clinch the title? Or do you think they are actually totally unbiased?
No, I tend to believe what Zak Brown says. He wants them to race. He says this, it's good for the sport to have the two guys race each other. And the team honestly do not really care. No Formula One team actually cares which of their two drivers becomes the champion. That's always been the case. They certainly is. Okay, maybe in the case of Ferrari and Michael Schumacher, maybe that was different. But
they were obvious about it. There was a clear number 2. Yes. I mean, there was, you're right.
Yeah, sure. In that was the case. But the team only wants to win the Constructors Championship, and if they can also win the Drivers' Championship, as we saw in 2024 last year for McLaren. They wanted to win the Constructors Championship. They were not too fussed about who's going to be the Drivers' Championship. It could be Max, it could be either of the two of them. The team did not really care about that too much, because that's where the money lies. That is where the value lies for the team. The higher they finish, and obviously as the champion, that's the highest you can get. The more money they earn, not only from sponsors but also prize money and everything that goes along with that. So that's what the team is in Formula One for. That is to win the Constructors Championship. So Lando being longer in the team than Oscar. I see I saw somebody quoting David Coulthard at some point, arguing that yes, Lando is the favorite in the team because Zak Brown is his manager. Zak Brown is not his manager. He's got a manager. Zak Brown is his boss. And yes, he did look after Lando earlier on in his career, in his junior career, but ever since he's been in the Formula One team, it's that, because that would be a clear clash of interest. So that is not the case. I don't believe Lando is being favored. I just believe that these situations, cannot be compared with each other. Each situation that it appears that Lando had, been favoured. Objectively, it wasn't the case. Objectively, the team had good reasons to do what they had to do in order to protect the team's interests. But again, as I said earlier on, I think from here onwards, the team's interests are done, settled. Now it's the two drivers, and it's whoever comes out on top should be the champion, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree. But one last point before we move on. When you're managing a situation like this, and you're managing it as artificially as this, then you should manage it properly. For example, Oscar, getting hot-headed during the race, feeling it was unfair. They should have clearly communicated to him that, listen, it was racing. This is why we're doing it. I'm just giving an example. With the wheel gun in Monza, the way they communicate, I know it's in the race and it's in the heat of the moment, and maybe, circumstances aren't ideal. But the point is, if you want to manage something, you've got to do a pretty damn good job of it. Otherwise, things are going to fall on the ground here.
No, sure, but I don't think we should regard them managing the situation in public. In other words, based on the radio transmissions that we hear. Obviously, those kind of discussions are happening behind the scenes in the weeks up to and after the race, days maybe then into and after the race. Those are in-depth discussions, and I'm pretty sure that those discussions behind the scenes, behind closed doors, sometimes probably, are pretty robust because we only see the surface. We only see the maybe some of the results of those discussions or some of the symptoms of a situation. We do not really know unless you are behind those closed doors. You won't really know what those discussions are like and what ground is being covered and how issues are being resolved. So I think let's be careful. They must manage it. Obviously, they do. But they obviously do it behind the scenes. And again, you can manage as much as you want to, but situations tend to catch you out. So you should lay down principles, and if you base your decisions on principles, then you can deal with virtually every situation as it gets thrown into your face.
Yeah, talking about racing incidents now, but maybe not particularly concerning McLaren, but the fact that Lando was bumped into Oscar by Max was a racing incident. The fact that the wheel gun malfunctioned, if it was any other team, it would have been a racing incident as well. I mean, not in the sense that it was on the track, but it affected the race. And now that because the teammates, they wanted to swap back again, it's not really the same thing, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, and the malfunctioning wheel gun for Oscar this time is just the mirror image of what happened in Monza. I mean, he came in second, and whereas in Monza, Lando came in second, and on both occasions, both of them had wheel gun malfunction. I mean, that is a failure by the team, and it's been going on. I mean, they've had a number of these situations. I haven't got the statistic in front of me, but I've seen some statistics that clearly show that they are the team that's worst as far as pit stops are concerned this entire season, losing a lot of time for either driver due to virtually the same factor all the time, and that's a malfunctioning wheel gun. So, that is something for the team to resolve. It is something that can potentially, of course, affect the outcome of the World Championship, and which is why I'm again going to argue that if that happens, then it's simply a question of, sorry, we are not going to manage the situation because we are not managing the situation anymore. True. So if the team continues to manage the situation, they can run into a situation where that failure can determine the outcome of it, and then they would be obliged to act, and whatever way they act then is going to be seen as unfair to the other party. Lose. So the simplest way of not getting into that situation is to say from here onwards, not involved at all. Doesn't matter if it's a pit lane malfunction. Tough, almost said tough. So if anything like that happens, it's going to be regarded as a racing incident. Maybe not before, but before the situation was different. You cannot now say because something happened before, if it happens again, we've got to deal with it the same way. Before, the situation was different. The team's championship wasn't clinched yet before. So after it has been clinched, the situation is different. Then they don't have to get involved. So, it is tricky. Of course, it's tricky. But how else do you deal with a situation like this? We've seen in the past, when teams don't try and manage the situation, it becomes all-out war. It happened at Mercedes. It happened at Ferrari on a number of occasions. McLaren, Senna and Prost. You know how if you don't manage it, you've got to manage it. But if you don't manage it, it's even worse.
All right, I want to ask you this question. Last 3 races, McLaren didn't win. They didn't even start on pole, if I remember correctly. Have they fallen off a cliff now? Has Red Bull now suddenly... Why are they suddenly not winning anymore?
Well, that is very interesting, isn't it? Last week we spoke about, will Singapore prove that Red Bull has now caught up and that they are now, that Max is a real threat for the Drivers' Championship? I don't always want to sit on the fence, but I mean, Max had so many problems in Singapore in terms of not only mechanical problems where he couldn't have proper up and down shifts in his gearbox, he also had problems with the balance of the car and the predictability of the handling of the car. Yes, the car was clearly faster and clearly better than it used to be in Singapore, and yes, they clearly have made a step forward, but there were so many problems. I'm not sure, and Yuki was nowhere. The car has obviously made a step forward, and it was interesting that Charles Leclerc said after the race. He said that at the beginning of the season, the gap between us, that's Ferrari, and McLaren was a given. That gap, he says, is still the same, the gap between them and McLaren. But he said, since then, and especially after Monza, first Red Bull has now moved in between them. And now, after Singapore, Mercedes seems to have moved in there, and that those 3 teams are now equal, said Leclerc. In other words, McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes are on the same level, according to Leclerc, and then only 4th comes Ferrari. I think there's a lot of truth to that. I'm not quite sure that, on every circuit that those 3 teams are going to be equal. I think that's not quite established yet. It could well be established in Austin in a week's time. But I still think it's a little bit early to say, that Max, for instance, is now a serious threat. I know McLaren regards him as a serious threat, but the fact of the matter is there are 6 races to go. Okay, you've got to add the 3 sprints as well. But basically, as far as 6 Grand Prix weekends are concerned, for Max to beat Oscar, right? He's now 63 points behind him, is it? Yeah, 63 points behind him. 6 races to go. That means he's got to score more than 10 points per race, every race, more than Oscar to actually, take the title. Before Singapore, there were 7 races to go, and the gap was 69 points. So, basically he needed to score 10 points per race more than Oscar. He didn't do so in Singapore, which means that the points that he needs to score to get back onto that equation has got to be more now. So for the next race, for instance, he's now got to score, I think, 13 points more to get back to that sort of same equation again. So it's not going to be as simple as, Max is now, apart from the possibility, of course, that the 2 McLaren drivers can actually influence the situation themselves.
Take each other out.
That's what I mean. If they take each other out, then obviously you can. But I think on pure performance, purely on merit, I do not think that's a realistic possibility yet. Who knows? It could change. I'm quite willing to change my point of view if the situation changes. But at this point, I think it's too early. It's too early to say that. So let's wait for the next race in Austin, which is a completely different circuit, and let's see what happens there.
Well, let's talk about Mercedes. Typically, if it's cooler, when it's cooler, like Canada, a bit more of a tight track, Mercedes, could do a bit better. This was a different track. Yes, it was a street circuit, but it was hot. It's very hot. And humid and everything else. Typically conditions that don't suit the Mercedes. Yeah. How did this happen? How did he end up in pole firstly? And how did he win this race?
Well, George was as surprised as anybody else. I don't think anybody really expected it, but he was pretty strong throughout the weekend. And he put down 2 absolute scorching laps in qualifying 3 on Saturday. His first lap was by far better than anybody else, and his second lap was even quicker than that. Yeah, by 7,000 or something, but still, nobody else could improve on their first or on their second run versus their first run in Q3, which was something that the commentators, or at least the commentators that I listened to, missed. Everybody sort of assumed that the track would improve during Q3, and the second runs will necessarily, all of them will be quicker than the first runs. Nobody, but George was able to do that. So he said afterwards, and I found this very interesting. Well, let's first of all say that the track temperature wasn't as high as was expected. I checked the track temperature last year was in the 40s. And the track temperature on Sunday was only, I think, 32 or 33. So it was cooler already. And of course, they had a rain shower about an hour before the race. So it was cooled down already. And a little bit, damp, which was a factor on the start as well. So we didn't even mention that. But the track temperature was lower than was expected. So, that played a little bit, I think, into the hands of the Mercedes. And George said afterwards, he thinks another factor, and this is interesting, he thinks another factor was that at 8 places around the circuit, around the lap, the track surface was new. New track surface meant less abrasive tarmac, and so therefore, not as hard, and less bumpy as well. Yes, and he thought that was a big favor, a big factor, in their favor in the improved performance. So that is interesting. The Mercedes, as you say, struggle when they cannot heat up or when they cannot keep the tire temperature under control. Here it wasn't a factor because of the cooler track temperature and the different or large part of the lap, different track surface. So I don't know. I'm not in a position to be able to confirm that or not, but it does kind of make sense from my point of view. And also the other thing is, that clearly also played a role in the fact that the McLaren, which is normally pretty good at tracks where track temperature is a factor, or maintaining or controlling tire temperature is a factor. McLaren is normally pretty good at it. It wasn't really that much of a factor on this occasion, on Sunday. Nobody really struggled with tire degradation in terms of lap time loss. So it really wasn't that much of a factor. And I think that probably also played a role in the competitiveness of not only Mercedes, but also the Red Bull. And it probably played a role as far as Ferrari is concerned, because Ferrari really struggled. And what I was surprised about, sorry to change the subject, what I was surprised about was that Ferrari was struggling with their brakes that much. Both Leclerc and Hamilton. And as far as Hamilton is concerned, his brake situation cost him 5 seconds penalty at the end of the race, which incidentally the TV director missed completely. Nobody, I think, knew when the checkered flag fell, and in fact, nobody picked it up that that Hamilton lost almost 40 seconds or 30 seconds or something in the last lap to Fernando Alonso. And nobody picked it up. Everybody was concerned about the front runners and the celebrations, after the McLaren team success. So the TV director completely missed that, and so it was a big story afterwards. Why did Lewis, cut the corners so often? It was because he was trying to stay ahead of Fernando Alonso, because he didn't have any brakes. Lewis,
without crashing,
without crashing. So he didn't want to, go hard into corners, and didn't want to, wanted to straighten corners as far as he could. And obviously that cost him the 5 seconds. But why was Ferrari so struggling so much with their brakes? I don't understand why. Because that is a circuit that is very hard on brakes, but that's the same for everybody.
Does everybody use Brembos, by the way?
No.
Well, that's the thing. Hamilton is struggling with the Brembos at Ferrari. I'm sure.
But they're not the only team that uses Brembo.
No, sure. But I mean, the way, the feeling of the Brembo apparently doesn't suit them.
Yeah, but that's different for Hamilton. Yeah, that's different for Hamilton. It doesn't mean that the brakes are bad. It's just because he's not used to. He's used to use carbon. What is it? Carbon industry brakes at Mercedes. That's just the feel of the brakes. But anyway, so something that Leclerc was also complaining about afterwards, and this is something that's kind of a theme by Ferrari ever since the disqualification. Where was that? Early in the season already. That was in China.
Yeah, China.
because they were running too low. And ever since then, they've been forced to run the car higher and or low, but then the drivers then have to lift and coast. In other words, come off the accelerator for a while before you hit the brakes. That's basically what it means. And Leclerc was complaining after the race that they had to do this for 200 meters, he said, before every corner. Now, 200 meters before every corner, that's a huge difference. If you come off the brakes 200 meters before the corner, anybody behind you will slam into your back. But anyway, so he was complaining about that. And I think they are still suffering from having to run the car low, but then to try and minimize the damage to the plank, the drivers have to lift and coast before they hit the brakes and turn into the corner. I don't know whether the fact that they have to run the car in that way maybe had an effect on the way that the brakes worked, or maybe the brake cooling didn't quite work the way they did. Maybe they didn't provide enough cooling for the brakes because they didn't want to add drag to the car. I don't know whether those things could have played a role, but they seem to be the only team that really suffered with their braking. The others obviously had to manage it as well. Everybody had to manage their brakes, but not Ferrari wasn't able to do that.
Just in closing, we talked about George Russell just now. Has he now got a contract yet? Because we all expected him to get a new contract after the summer break, and still no word.
No, he doesn't. And we're going to have this question all the time, despite the fact that Toto Wolff has already said these are my two drivers for next year. Somebody's speculating, and again, I'm not that close, but somebody has been speculating that it's because George is holding out for a longer-term contract. We mentioned this in a couple of weeks ago, that he wants to hold out for a longer-term contract. Mercedes probably wants to offer him a one-year contract plus a one-year option. And I think that is because Mercedes is still holding out for a possibility that Max Verstappen could become available in 2027. So I think those factors are playing a role. But George, is laying down his marker, after Sunday's performance. That was certainly something that needed to make Mercedes think again. Let's make sure that we keep hold of this guy. Maybe they want to sacrifice Antonelli. I don't know. We've also had this discussion before. It doesn't make sense to me that for next year or the year after. So I don't know what the reason is. And poor George has got to get. He's going to get the same questions by the media every single time until they actually put out a statement and say, yes, it's been done and we've signed on the dotted line. So no more questions, please. So.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting to me. There's a saying that says if you play hard to get, you get nothing. And there are only 20 seats in Formula One, 22 next year. The point is, if you play too hard, there might just, it's many people queuing up to get a seat in Formula One, especially a Mercedes seat. Maybe George might be overplaying his hand because this is now really running a bit late, I think. I hear what you're saying for 1 year and everybody. I mean, it's unusual. I definitely think it's unusual.
It is unusual. Normally, this kind of thing is settled in the summer break. But that's just a norm. That's neither here nor there. It can happen like that or not. So I don't think George is in any danger of losing his seat at Mercedes. I don't think at all. He's the team leader clearly, and they need somebody like him for next year in the team to help stabilize the whole situation. Maybe it's just a question of money. Who knows? And the more times he wins, I think the more he can insist on a bit of an increase.
Listen, Hendrik, we never said congratulations to McLaren. So well done for a second year in a row. But I want to briefly talk to you about Mercedes not winning that constructor, but their customer winning that. Ron Dennis said famously, you cannot win the championship without your own engine. Remember when he took on Honda?
Yes. Yeah.
That's been proven emphatically wrong. So what do you think Toto Wolff feels like at the moment?
I think he's pretty pissed off. It's a customer team that beats him after they've had such a long run. But what can you do about it? You've got to give the team credit for doing a better job. They've got a better car from the word go basically than the Mercedes. Mercedes, starting off the ground effect era with that silly, it turns out silly afterwards, but you didn't know that, silly, what is it, no side pod?
Zero side pods, yeah.
Zero side pod concept, and I think that put them on the back foot anyway from the beginning. So I think Toto can be dissatisfied with his own team and his own performance, but that's the way it goes. You cannot win everything, and sometimes somebody does a better job than you, and give them credit. I don't think he hasn't given them credit. I mean, they are sort of the same family, though, in terms of engines, anyway. But it's great for Formula One to have a McLaren that works well. And if you think where they were only 2 years ago, only 2 seasons ago, they were at the bottom. They were really at the bottom. It is the most remarkable turnaround. And it's not because it's from one technical dispensation to another. It is inside the same dispensation. And it just shows you, if you have the right people in the right positions and they gel as a team and they work towards the same goal, they work together with the same vision, then it can happen. I mean, you've got all the resources. You have to have the resources, obviously, the physical resources, but it's the people that make the difference. We've seen it.
And
exactly.
Zak
the
Brown,
leadership,
Andrea Stella. I mean,
and the people. I mean, there's one glaring example of having enough money and limitless budget in the past that didn't necessarily, or did not, in fact, lead to any significant success, and that's Toyota. Many years ago, limitless budget, and they had all the money in the world that they could spend in the time, long before there was such a thing as a budget cap. So, and that didn't work for them. BMW, same example. It didn't work for them. So, and Honda, in fact, also as a works team. So, there are enough examples of the fact that money doesn't make the difference. It's the people that make the difference. And that's what McLaren can thank. That is what their success can thank for. Well, that's not English. They can thank their success for the people that they have, the way that they worked. Yes.
All right, Hendrik, thanks, man. It was an interesting one. I enjoyed that. Being a McLaren fan myself, I'm very chuffed with the Constructors. I'm just hoping.
Well, congratulations to you then too.
Thank you. I've been waiting for this one. I appreciate it. No, it's good, man. It's so lucky to see that McLaren. I just wish they could go back to my old red and white, that traditional look. I know they can't. I know the sponsorship and everything, but that to me is still McLaren.
Yeah.
That Ayrton Senna era. Anyway, Hendrik, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Talk again.
The F1 Focus Podcast with MV Velman and Hendrik Verwoerd.